In 1993, I had my second child. So let me paint the picture. I already had a gorgeous daughter, wonderful husband. I was in graduate school to get my PhD in psychology. My second child was born, a little boy, thriving. So I had everything I had dreamed of. I had a daughter, I had a son, great husband, and when he was 4 months old, he had a very severe reaction to a medication. And in the course of a couple of hours, he went from a totally healthy baby to a horribly damaged one. On that day, I became the mother of a brain-damaged child, and I'll always be the mother of a brain-damaged child. And it was horrible. In fact, in the moment, it was the worst thing that I could imagine happening to me. Everything had changed. But what I'm here to tell you about today is that event has also been one of the most beautiful and graceful things that I've ever had happen in my life. And I'm almost reticent to say that, to talk about it. I sound like I have some kind of psychiatric issue saying that. Let me tell you a little bit more about it. The joke that we have in the family is that this kid, in this highly overly educated, kind of neurotic family, is the best adjusted one in the family, by far. The other thing that I'd tell you that he's taught me, and his name is Porter, is that it's impossible to tell what is a good thing and what is a bad thing when it happens. So often something that looks like a bad thing, a horrible thing, what happened to my son, ends up having pieces to it that are incredible. And that leads to my second point. Sometimes these really, really difficult pieces of our lives are the thing that opens up this ability to connect with all sorts of people that we would never have any kind of connection to. The women I have met, other moms, they call themselves warrior moms, of other kids with autism or brain damage or developmental delays, are the most incredible people I've ever known. I mean, these women have taught me everything I know about resilience, about love, about understanding that even when something really terrible happens, your whole perspective changes. So what is my life like today that's different? What has Porter taught me about being a different person? You know, when he was born, the kinds of things I thought about when he was a baby was, you know, will he go to an Ivy League school? Porter can't even write his name today. He doesn't know the alphabet. He's 23 years old. He has a job, but he goes to a sheltered workshop every day and he shreds paper. He does that for his living. But here's the other piece that Porter's taught me. You've never been with a person who can be more present in the moment. He walks around with his heart wide open, just the door is banged wide. And when somebody walks around with a heart that open, all sorts of people come in. His default setting is a hug. He goes into a crowd, he doesn't see if you're black, if you're white, if you're old, if you're young, if you've got money, or if you're homeless. And he comes in ready to give you a big hug. He also doesn't worry about what's going to happen tomorrow. He doesn't worry about how he looks. I have never once seen him show his muscles to somebody. More than I can say for my other teenage sons. Porter has taught all of us that being present, being together with our family, being able to sit down in a park and look at the flowers off in the distance is something that can give you all the happiness you need right in this moment. We were sitting in the park the other day, and off in the distance, it was a windy day, there were a bunch of flowers, some wildflowers out in the field, and they were swaying back and forth, and they were gold, and they were red. And Porter looked over, and he paused, and he got a look on his face, and he said, "Mommy, I hear the angels sing." And I look at him often, and I think, I know that he does. Porter is someone who has taught all of us to be the best version of ourselves. And if I can learn one thing and go through life with half of these qualities, being in the moment, connecting to the people that are right in front of us, even the people that look totally different from us, and being able to say that even when something bad happens, many good things are going to come out of that, if we can be open to it, if we don't get stuck. All of this, blends in and is a really interesting experience being a psychologist as I go through it. Sometimes when I'm with my son and these things happen, I have half of my brain telling me, there's a research study that backs that up. And the other half of my brain is saying, be quiet and just sit down at the park and look at the flowers with your son. But there are research studies to back this up. We get very caught up in thinking about what we have or what we want to have. Does the car reflect what I want in terms of my image, or is my house right? Or are my kids getting the kind of grades we want in school? And what we know from psychology research is really interesting. Many studies have set out to look at what happens in the lives of lottery winners. So most of us think, oh, Lord, if I won the lottery, all my problems would be solved. I would get all the things I want to get, and I wouldn't worry about money, and I would be happy. And what we know from research is that it's not at all like that. When you look at lottery winners a year later, they are no happier than they were at the time they won the lottery. In fact, a good portion of them are less happy. And when they've been interviewed and people have said, what is your life like? The kinds of things that they will tell you is that the money not only opened up some positive possibilities, but it opened up a lot of problems too. One man was interviewed and he said, before I won millions of dollars, I had a lovely life in this small town where I live. And I had my wife and my job and my coworkers. And I won the mega ball, and I quit my job. And all of a sudden, strangers, relatives, half relations I didn't know I had, started coming out of the woodwork and asking me for money. And the kids didn't want to have jobs after that. And when I wasn't working at the post office anymore, I realized I'd lost my whole social group. And he said, I would give anything at this point not to have won that damn lottery. That isn't the kind of thing you're expecting to see. Now, I'm on the other side. We won the unlottery, or so I thought. What happened to my son has only happened to 1 in 300,000 children that received the medication he got. And I remember lying on the hospital floor, lying on the cold pavement and crying, thinking there's no possible way my life will ever be good again. And I got back up, and I sat up Indian style on the floor, and it was dark, and I was in the parents' lounge. And another mother came into the lounge with me, and she had a child in the ICU also. And the room was dim, and we were sitting on the floor together. And the couch behind us, it was completely empty. We could have sat there, but we didn't sit there. We wanted to sit on the floor. And I didn't know this woman, but she grabbed my hand and she held it and she said, it's really hard, isn't it? And I didn't know what was going on with her child, but I knew exactly what she meant about it being hard. And it was horrible, and we cried. And it was really beautiful also, because I didn't know this woman, and I had a huge connection to her. And that's exactly what has happened every step of the way with my son. And that's what happens when really painful things occur, and we can keep our hearts open. When you go into a 12-step meeting, they have a saying for this. People straggle in, and they often look like hell, and they feel like they've done things that nobody on the planet would ever understand. And they'll often start telling their story, and they'll say their worst thing, and you can see they're in a lot of turmoil even getting this hideous story out. And 3 people will say, oh yeah, I did that too. It's going to get a lot better. And that's exactly what we find out when we go through these experiences. Instead of trying to shut down your life and say, I'm going to put that behind me, I'm going to bury it, I'm not going to let anyone know about this shameful thing. If we can keep ourselves open, something really magical happens. And that is that there's a huge space opened up for other people to come in. And other people that you want to come in. So a lot of us walk around and you'd have no idea that any of us have any kind of problem going on. Most of us have it covered, we look good, we've got the haircut, we've got the clothes. Porter doesn't get to do that. Porter wears a seizure helmet. So everywhere we go, it's broadcast, problem, disability. And in the beginning, I often felt kind of self-conscious about that. What would people think? And he was always doing something vaguely inappropriate because he was hyperactive when he was little, and he'd be racing around and grabbing things and looking out of control. I spent a good portion of the time worrying about what other parents were thinking. And then I decided, instead of focusing so much on trying to fix this problem that I perceived he had, instead of trying so hard to change what had happened to my son, I realized that what had to be fixed was my own brain and the way that I looked at him. And I can tell you today, 20 years later, my main wish is that I'll be able to start looking at the world much more the way he does. So there are three main things that I would love for you to take away from this story. And that is this. When something happens in our life, when something happens in your life and you get that pit in your stomach, it's something you don't want to have happen. And it might be catastrophic, like something happening to your child. It might be a divorce you don't want to be having. It might be something embarrassing or shameful, something you have a knee-jerk reaction you don't want people to know. I want you to pause for a minute and think about Porter. And remember what I said about my epiphany as I sat on the floor in the ICU Parents Lounge. That in that moment as something happens, we don't know. And in the exact same moment in which something difficult happens is always a huge capacity for good to come out of that. Life is not happening to us, it's happening for us. And our job in that moment is not to fight it, is to feel whatever we need to feel, but to trust that this is unfolding in a direction that is going to be meaningful and that is going to bring good and grace into our life. The way that we're going to do that, the way that that transformation is going to happen is through connection. We may have an impulse in that moment to shut down. I mean, every animal that exists on earth when it's in fear or in pain curls up. That is our psychological impulse. And what I want to say to you is that this is a time instead to open, to prop that heart open, and to talk to people honestly about what's going on. I guarantee you will have 10 people come in for each story you tell who will relate to you, who will talk to you, and they'll be a little bit further down the road than you are. As you go through that, the other thing that I would really encourage you to do is to remember that we think about life in big chunks. We think about life as going from 0 to age 90, or while my children are young. But the reality is, life is happening in minutes. Life is happening in this moment. And when we're feeling overwhelmed by those big things that are happening, all we need to do is put our feet onto the ground, and sometimes I do it barefoot. Feel the ground and know that we are being held and safe in that moment. And to know that this moment is going to be okay. Over the next week, I want you to find a place that you can either be outside or look outside, somewhere that you see some flowers that are moving in the breeze. I want you to pause, and I want you to really look at those flowers. Think about Porter for a minute, and I think maybe you'll hear the angels sing as well.